Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, for our purposes right now, here today, and maybe at no other point in time, Friday, October 30th, 2020, and we are once again pre-recording for your listening pleasure during this weekday morning. Didn't really think there was a good bet that I'd be able to get up and provide a live show for you today, given through my time travels, the surgery I had yesterday, which I haven't had yet, if truth be known. Okay, you know what's going on here. Now, Fridays, we would ordinarily have Ian Reifowitz with us, and we would run through the various stories that he has published in the past week, take a look ahead at what might be coming in the week to come. But of course, without a live program, the opportunity to do this is limited. But, as you know, this is written product from Ian. And so, perhaps the next best thing is that we could spend some time reading through what Ian had in store for you and see where that leads us in a discussion. And he's got 3 pieces, 2 relatively short ones and 1 lengthier one. I thought I might start with the lengthier one here, and I think it would be of some particular interest to all of you. It has some procedural angle to it, too. I don't know whether Ian covers it in the same way. We might cover it in discussion, but I thought I would read through his piece here from Tuesday, the 27th, earlier this week. Trump hasn't protected pre-existing conditions, and he can't do it in the future without the ACA. Bit of an ironic situation. And I think probably this has occurred to many of you in listening to Trump repeatedly insisting that he was somehow going to protect those with pre-existing conditions, despite the fact that he aimed to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And you might ask, well, as several journalists who have interviewed him about it have asked, how? How do you intend to protect people with pre-existing conditions? And, of course, the answer, like with everything else, is, well, I just will. It'll be beautiful. We'll do it in a beautiful, beautiful way, and something, and if you press me any further, you're nasty. Well, I think Ian probably gets right to it here. Ian says today, had I made it possible, let's say, for him to be here today, I sure have missed Barack Obama. As much as I've come to appreciate the talents and charms of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it's great to see the 44th president out there again talking to voters, as he has been doing, and even having some fun. For example, slamming Trump's heretofore unknown Chinese bank account. The Beijing Barry line was epic. Okay, I may have missed that one. But when it comes to health care and the Republicans' push to overturn the Affordable Care Act in the middle of a pandemic with no plan to replace its protections for people with pre-existing conditions, Obama turned serious. And, we love serious Obama, too. In Miami on Saturday, President Obama eviscerated the current occupant of the White House and his party on health care, and specifically on what would happen if the Supreme Court does strike down the Affordable Care Act. And a little excerpt from the speech here. When they're asked about it, they say, well, look, we're going to have a great replacement. It's coming. It's going to be there in 2 weeks. Even he can tell exactly what that rhetorical trick is. It's going to be there in 2 weeks. It's been 10 years now. Every 2 weeks they say they've got a replacement, and they haven't come up with anything. They've never had a replacement. I promise you. I asked back when I was president. I said, show me your replacement and we can talk. Nothing. Nada. Zero. Zilch. Goose egg. The reason they don't show you their plan to actually provide people protections when it comes to pre-existing conditions is because they don't have one and they never have. To his credit, Obama's vice president got off a pretty good zinger of his own on this point during the last presidential debate. He's never come up with a plan. I guess we're going to get the pre-existing condition plan the same time we get the infrastructure plan that we waited for since 17, 18, 19, and 20. Jokes aside, and that wasn't really a great joke either, but okay. The jokes are aside now. Let's make clear what would happen if Amy Coney Barrett and the radical right-wing majority on the Supreme Court disappear Obamacare. At least 21 million people who have gotten health care coverage through the law would lose it, including 12 million adults benefiting from the ACA's expansion of Medicaid and 3 million kids who got covered through their parents thanks to that expansion or the law's expansion of the Children's Health Insurance Program. You remember the old CHIP program. Plus, up to 133 million Americans who now suffer from some kind of pre-existing condition, they'd lose it too. The ACA prevents health insurance companies, as you know, from discriminating against them on price or simply denying or retroactively canceling their coverage. Two things that were all too common beforehand. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation's analysis, 27%, more than 1 out of every 4, of all adults aged 18 to 64 has a pre-existing condition serious enough that they would find themselves unable to get coverage at any price, if not for the ACA. Please note that analysis was done pre-COVID, which has left huge numbers of Americans with a diagnosis that could put them in a similarly dire situation if Obamacare is repealed. As we know, the man who lost the popular vote has no plan. There wasn't even one in the big fat binder full of malarkey that he had his press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, present to Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes after he stormed out of their recent interview. I didn't realize that she presented that to her afterwards. Why even accept that? You should have thrown it at her. Or thrown it back at her. This is just the latest attempt by Trump to fool people with an eye-grabbing visual that has no actual substance when one examines it closely. In many ways, it's a metaphor for his entire gaslighting presidency. What's incredible, and I mean this literally, in that I find it impossible to believe, is that 2 separate polls found that over 80% of Republicans somehow think their candidate will do more to protect people with pre-existing conditions than the Biden-Harris ticket. Trump keeps saying he'll show us his plan, just like he did in the summer and the spring and in 2019 and long before that. I'm thinking it must be the same corner Trump's been saying with the dead-eyed look of a guy selling snake oil cures that we're rounding the COVID-19 corner, right? Most recently, the orange Julius Caesar repeated the lie about his non-existent health care plan to Leslie Stahl. A little exchange here, Trump saying, "It is developed, it's fully developed, it's going to be announced very soon." Leslie asks, "When?" And Trump says, "When we see what happens with Obamacare." Yeah, I'll believe that just as much as I'll believe we'll see his taxes when the audit is finished. One might ask what Trump hopes to accomplish by pulling stunts like this, given that the media debunks them immediately. Well, they don't debunk them to his face enough, I guess. But anyway, the answer is that, as the aforementioned survey shows, there are plenty of people who simply ignore the real media if the impeached president tells them something different. Trump's campaign strategy, i.e., whatever his gut tells him to do in a given moment, relies on there somehow being enough of these voters to put him over the top. We'll find out if he's right in a week. Regarding the election, this question of where the Republican replacement plan for Obamacare is has also tripped up candidates further down the ballot. One of the only races where a Democrat is concerned with holding on to a U.S. Senate seat is in Michigan. That's where Republican John James last week face-planted when an interviewer asked about the lack of a replacement plan for the ACA, either from Trump or on his own campaign's website. Now, I want to focus on people with pre-existing conditions. Ready? As he has before, Trump on 60 Minutes maintained that he would protect them if Obamacare fell. And he said he hoped it would fall. Here's the relevant section of the interview in an embedded tweet here from the American Independent, noting that in this footage of the 60 Minutes interview, Trump gets upset at Leslie Stahl when she points out that his rallies this year are not as well attended as his 2016 rallies. And then another clip where Trump still continues to promise his non-existent health care plan. And he then says, regarding Obamacare and the Supreme Court, "I hope that they end it. It will be so good if they end it." Asked how he will protect pre-existing conditions, Trump continues to have no answer. They will be totally protected, Trump claims. What he either doesn't know, comprehend, or care about is that he can't protect people with pre-existing conditions without a larger national health care system that either is the already existing Affordable Care Act or something so similar that the difference is meaningless, or something even more progressive somehow, like Medicare for all. Now here's why. If Trump tries to just require the insurance companies to sell policies to people with pre-existing conditions at the same price as everyone else, even though those folks will almost certainly need more health care, he'll put them out of business. Putting aside how one feels about such a development, it would cause a tremendous disruption to our healthcare system. The requirement that insurance companies treat people with pre-existing conditions the same as everyone else works hand in hand with other elements of Obamacare or any other conceivable national health insurance program. Without being part of that system, such a requirement would mean large numbers of healthy people with enough money to pay out-of-pocket healthcare expenses as long as they didn't become really sick or injured would simply go around uninsured until they became really sick or injured, and at that point, those people would buy insurance, paying the same premiums as everyone else, and run up huge medical bills that lead to major losses for the insurance companies. In order to avoid those losses, the companies would have to ramp up the cost of premiums, which would only drive additional healthier people out of the market, thus driving up premiums even more, and rinse and repeat. This cycle, known as the death spiral, and we remember that from back in the day, would destroy the insurance market completely, as Larry Levitt, the Kaiser Family Foundation's Executive Vice President for Health Policy, explained in a Washington Post op-ed. Regarding the protections for people with pre-existing conditions, Levitt's piece concluded, "You can't just sprinkle magic pixie dust and wish away the complications and trade-offs," which so far is Trump's approach. The only way to require the companies to not discriminate on pre-existing conditions without bankrupting them and or creating the death spiral is to give them something in return. The individual mandate was supposed to get people to buy insurance, and if they didn't, to contribute to the pot anyway. But that's gone. Nevertheless, far more impactful were, 1, the creation of the individual market that allowed millions of people to buy insurance without having to go through an employer, and 2, the subsidies in the ACA that have made insurance premiums affordable for millions who couldn't have afforded it before. Most of the people getting insurance on the exchanges created by Obamacare are receiving subsidies, 84% during the most recently completed open enrollment period, so the exchanges without the subsidies would do little good. Having those millions more customers, all under 65 years old, as senior citizens get Medicare, means millions of younger, relatively profitable policyholders who balance out what the companies lose by no longer being able to discriminate against those with pre-existing conditions. There's also another element the system needs in order to work. The government shouldn't subsidize the purchase of crap policies. That's an industry term that don't provide adequate coverage. So the ACA included rules to establish baselines of what must be covered in every policy in order to ensure that the companies don't just get all these new customers on taxpayers' dimes and then sell them junk insurance, not to mention protecting consumers in general. Note that Trump has actually weakened those safeguards, as the Brookings Institute explained in an article linked herein. All these pieces complement one another. Protecting people with pre-existing conditions requires these other components to make it work for everybody, really, here, but A, the companies, B, the people who need insurance, and C, the government. That's why you need Obamacare, or something more progressive like Medicare for all. There is simply no other way, despite what Trump pretends. Furthermore, it's not just that Trump is lying about protecting people with pre-existing conditions if Obamacare is repealed. He's also been lying when he talks about the things he's done to protect them thus far, such as when he claimed that he had saved pre-existing conditions in your health care. That's a quote. It's important you all know that this capitalization in this quote is his and not Ian's when you read it. Now, how exactly has he saved pre-existing conditions in your health care, which isn't even a proper statement of what he's done? Well, a month ago, Trump signed an executive order that he touted with great fanfare because it supposedly protects people with pre-existing conditions no matter what happens with Obamacare at the Supreme Court. Sounds great, right? The problem is that because it is an executive order issued by the president alone rather than actual legislation, it will do about as much to accomplish what it claims to accomplish as the email I sent to Ralph, my second cousin, once removed, in which I too declared protections for people with pre-existing conditions. In fact, the very people Trump has appointed to leading administration positions in healthcare admitted as much in a press briefing. What a joy it must be to serve in that administration. The reality of Trump's record is somewhat different from the grandiose claims he made, as Margot Sanger-Katz laid out in the New York Times. Her article included this remark from someone who will never be confused with a progressive on health care. And the quote is, "If there is any merit in the president's record on pre-existing conditions, it is purely by accident." That's said by Michael Cannon, the Director of Healthcare Policy Studies at the Libertarian Cato Institution. Mr. Cannon, who favors a less regulated health insurance market, is no fan of Obamacare, but says that Mr. Trump has little to support his claims. Healthcare consistently ranks as one of the most important issues for American voters as we head into the final week of this election, and not only because we are in the middle of a pandemic. Joe Biden has pledged his support for strengthening Obamacare by making a public option available to all. He'll also reform the law so that working and middle-class families who are just above the current income cutoffs will be able to receive premium subsidies. Biden will reduce the maximum cost of premiums purchased on the Obamacare exchanges from 9.86% of household income to 8.5%, saving significant money for large numbers of Americans. He'll also provide the Obamacare subsidies to people who would have received Medicaid if their states had accepted the ACA's expansion of that program, so they will get coverage without having to pay $1 in premiums. What's Donald Trump's plan? Apparently, it's to get rid of Obamacare and the protections it provides to tens of millions of people with pre-existing conditions while lying about having a way to protect them without the law. Conservatives love to talk about having healthcare choices. Judging the plans of the two major candidates, it shouldn't be a difficult choice at all. How do you like that? All right, well done, well summarized here. And of course, something that we've discussed before, and I think we all kind of innately knew that, well, clearly getting rid of the Affordable Care Act presents an insurmountable barrier to getting people coverage if they have pre-existing conditions, or just as importantly, conditions which insurance companies can say are pre-existing conditions or qualify in their minds as affecting the same requirement for higher premiums. And there's no regulation of that. If the insurance company says it's a pre-existing condition, for them, it is one. It's only in the passage of the Affordable Care Act, when that didn't matter anymore, that practice fell by the wayside. But long story short here, there's no way to get insurance companies to agree to treat everyone equally and eliminate the penalty for what they say are pre-existing conditions without a scheme almost exactly like the Affordable Care Act. So it's either keep it or replicate it. And that may always have been Trump's plan, to simply slap his name on it and say, well, it's Trump Care now, and you all have to buy it under that name instead. Good point. Well put. And, thanks, Ian, for doing so. Well, don't you wish that Ian were actually here to give you more? Aren't you hungry for more right now? Well, as it happens, there's another Tuesday piece that I can share with you, and this one a little bit shorter and on a slightly different subject. Come January, Democrats, he says, will shove McConnell's own words on Amy Coney Barrett down his throat. And doesn't that sound exciting? Let's read what that's all about. They did it. We knew that they did, of course, just like we knew they would. 4 short years after saying that 8 months before an election was too close to confirm or even consider confirming a new justice for the Supreme Court, Republican senators confirmed Amy Coney Barrett just 8 days before Election Day. We're going to need a new word for the level of head-spinning hypocrisy practiced by Senator Mitch McConnell on this one, but I want us all to mark the words that he used in justifying what he and his Republican Senate buddies did. The reason this outcome came about, says McConnell, is because we had a series of successful elections. What this administration and this Republican Senate has done is exercise the power that was given us by the American people in a manner that is entirely within the rules of the Senate and the Constitution of the United States. You knew he would say that. Okay, Mitch, you got it. Come January, when Joe Biden is sworn in and when Democrats have majorities in the House and Senate, the time will be at hand to undo the Republican court packing that has gone on since early in the Obama administration. Beyond the Supreme Court, there's McConnell's obstruction throughout the Obama presidency, and more importantly, his pressuring of Republican-appointed justices to retire as soon as possible so that he and Trump could further pack the court. Democrats, of course, must restore the balance to our judicial branch by unpacking it and undoing the violation of our constitutional norms carried out by Republicans, and here's the statement they should issue. His idea about it is the reason this outcome manifested is because we had a series of successful elections. What this administration and this Democratic Senate have done is exercise the power that was given to us by the American people in a manner that is entirely within the rules of the Senate and the Constitution of the United States. It's not about payback or karma. It's about protecting our democracy. Still, shoving Mitch's own words back down his throat does offer a certain degree of pleasure. Nothing wrong with that. That's true, too. And well said, and welcome statement, of course. And guess what? There's even more. Yes, even more Ian Reifowitz to share with you, and we'll fit in what we can before the break. Maybe we'll even finish. It's another short piece. Trump's political stooges replace top climate scientist with deniers. A move reminiscent of the old USSR. Remember them? Getting rid of a government official, even a high-ranking one, who dares show fealty to any principle other than loyalty to the official ideology, is exactly how they did it in the old USSR. In virtually every department, at multiple levels, there was always a political officer, an apparatchik. Their job was to make sure that people who worked in a given area of the government always followed the party line. In the United States, at least since the civil service reforms that began in the 1880s, our government is supposed to fill most of its positions based on merit and qualifications, not partisanship. In particular, in departments where the work being done is scientific in nature, political appointees are not supposed to interfere with the work of the experts. And then came Trump. This is only the latest of far too many examples of Sovietization of our government when it comes to science, including instances related directly to climate change. But this one, as described by the New York Times, might just be the most egregious. And a clip here from the Times. The Trump administration has recently removed the chief scientist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the nation's premier scientific agency, installed new political staff who have questioned accepted facts about climate change, and imposed stricter controls on communications at the agency. The moves threaten to stifle a major source of objective United States government information about climate change that underpins federal rules on greenhouse gas emissions and offers an indication of the direction the agency will take if President Trump wins re-election. The events that preceded Chief Scientist Craig McClain's removal read like something right out of a pulpy Cold War-era novel's depiction of Soviet bureaucracy. The firing unfolded after a clash between McClain and Eric Noble, a former policy advisor at the White House and a data analyst for the Trump campaign, who recently became chief of staff at NOAA. McClain emailed a few of the newly arrived NOAA officials, political appointees all, and simply requested that they acknowledge the scientific integrity policy that governs the agency's work. Noble didn't like that request very much and clicked send on the following reply, quote, "Respectfully, by what authority are you sending this to me?" That's some answer. McClain answered that as acting chief scientist of NOAA, it was his job to make certain that the agency's employees were adhering to the policy. How outrageous can you get, right? That is some answer. Respectfully, by what authority are you sending this to me? By authority of the send button. The send button almighty. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. We continue with reading Ian Reifowitz's latest piece. That is, unless it's superseded in the time over which we've traveled in our time travels these days. This one entitled Trump's Political Stooges Replace Top Climate Scientist with Deniers, a Move Reminiscent of the USSR. And we left off just after our chief scientist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, had sent an email to the new political appointees running the agency, inquiring after whether they would acknowledge the scientific integrity policy that governs the agency's work. And you recall that the new political head of the administration says, "By what authority are you sending this to me?" One morning later, Noble stripped him, and here we're talking about him is Craig McClain, the head scientist, stripped him of that authority. "You no longer serve as the acting chief scientist for NOAA. Thank you for your service." Well, that's an FU very much. The only policy that Trump wants government employees to abide by is the policy of personal loyalty to him and him alone. Just ask James Comey about that. By that point, Noble had already replaced McClain with a gentleman named Ryan, I don't know how he pronounces Maue, M-A-U-E. He's a meteorologist who formerly did research at the Cato Institute, where they're doing lots of meteorology, right? A staunchly libertarian think tank from which he launched attacks on scientists who, relying on actual science, have sounded the alarm on climate change. I don't know how this guy pronounces his name. I have no idea. Mao? Anyway, our Mr. Meteorologist here has also wandered into more directly partisan waters, falsely claiming that Joe Biden received questions from reporters in advance of a press conference. What would that even be an issue for him? I have no idea. Okay, well, sounds like someone who definitely will be 100% objective and non-political. Noble also created a new position at NOAA, that of Deputy Assistant Secretary, and filled it with David Legates, either Legates or Legates, you tell me, Legates, a geography and climatology professor, at least he's a climatologist, who doesn't quite believe human beings are exacerbating the warming of our planet. He's also been affiliated with the right-wing anti-climate change Heartland Institute. So many institutes they have. And is basically a stone-cold climate denier. Another guy who won't be blinded with science and lose sight of politics. The man who lost the popular vote has, simply through his public statements and actions on COVID-19, made a mockery of science. Hydroxychloroquine, anyone? Given the deaths of he's got 227,000 Americans, I'd peg it a little higher and over 230,000 by now. The firing of another bureaucrat might not seem like such a big deal. The point is that a second term of this impeached president will bring more and more such actions that do great harm to the health of actual people. At some point, there will be no one left in our government with any degree of responsibility who doesn't solely serve Trump's political interests. Facts, truth, science, and the lives of Americans be damned. That's just one additional reason to get out there and work your heart out for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Democrats up and down the ballot. So, Ian gives us an important theme that we can take off on here, and that is idiots in the American government employed by Donald Trump. And I bet you can probably guess where we're going with this one. Of course, it now being Friday, you probably expected to hear about this yesterday, but as you know, everything was being pre-recorded, and I'm pre-recording now. By the way, programming note, I am now recording post-surgically, which means that I am recording during a narcotic haze. So that's pretty good, too. Plus also a little bit of a rough throat. So hope you'll forgive me, and I hope I can forgive myself for agreeing to record the rest of this in this condition. But I just think that what will be Friday morning, which is when you're listening to this, I just don't know that I'd really be in shape to do it live. Being able to do it at my leisure is a totally different story. But anyway, you knew this story was coming. You knew this story was going to be published. You knew as soon as it was published that I was going to have to read it. I'm talking about CNN's story from Michael Warren and Jamie Gangel. Oh, and also Elizabeth Stewart, who for some reason doesn't have her name linked here and so doesn't appear in the bright blue that I can see through the drug haze. Jared Kushner bragged in April that Trump was taking the country, quote, back from the doctors, which is really not a place you want to be taking it from, quite honestly, in the middle of a pandemic. But that's what he's doing. And of course, April, it's not included in this story because this one I read in advance. You know I couldn't stop when I saw this thing. April was also when, and I was thinking it was like the end of April, a little bit after the interviews discussed in this piece. And they are Bob Woodward's interviews. In other words, Woodward got Kushner to sit down for recorded interviews too. He's just as ridiculously stupid as Trump. The two of them are unbelievable. Anyway, it was a little bit later in April. I always come back to this moment when Kushner, at the point at which the United States was sitting with 60,000 dead from the coronavirus, said that the Trump administration's response to the virus had been a great success story. We are now nearly at 4 times that number dead. We have quadrupled that death total, and we're still going, and going strong, very, very strongly. Very beautiful death toll that we have. 4 times more have died since he said it was a great success. We're going to have 240,000 dead by quote-unquote election day. We'll probably fall just a little bit short of that, but within days, possibly within hours, possibly before we know the results of the election, we will have 240,000 dead and be steaming toward 250,000 dead. Anyway, let's get right to the heart of it, shall we? President Donald Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, which is a bad idea already, and we're only a few words into the story here, but you all know. Jared Kushner boasted in mid-April about how the president had cut out the doctors and scientists advising him on the unfolding coronavirus pandemic. Comments that came as more than 40,000, at that time, Americans had already died from the virus, which was ravaging New York City, about which, of course, they didn't care because they didn't live there anymore. They knew they were hated figures, plus they were Democrats up there. So time for some death problems across the bridge from Fort Lee is pretty much how they approach this thing. But again, just to emphasize this, again, a theme now with Bob Woodward is getting tape on these guys and bringing it up later that months and months and months ago, they knew exactly what they were doing in terms of how they were going to F this whole thing up. Trump suppressing the truth about it and downplaying the virus, and Kushner in acknowledging that, yes, it was a goal in mid-April to get the doctors and scientists out of the decision-making. That's disgusting. It's right up there with their most despicable acts. Possibly top dog when it comes to that. All right. In a taped interview on April 18th, Kushner told legendary journalist Bob Woodward, okay, sure, that Trump was, quote, getting the country back from the doctors in what he called a, quote, negotiated settlement. The only thing you ought to be getting back from the doctors is your test results, not policy, health policy steering in the middle of a pandemic. But negotiated settlement, of course, there's got to be real estate a-hole language in the middle of all of this, because that's all he knows. And he doesn't even know that. We might as well get that on the table, too. Kushner also proclaimed that the U.S. was moving swiftly through the, quote, panic phase and the, quote, pain phase. Ooh, I'm in that one. Of the pandemic. Oh, different phase. And that the country was at the beginning of the comeback phase. We were not. That doesn't mean there's not still a lot of pain, and there won't be pain for a while, but that basically was, we've now put out rules to get back to work. Not an eloquent guy, Kushner. Trump's now back in charge. It's not the doctors. Of course, again, this was supposed to be a bragging point for him. It's a signal for looming disaster, I'm sure, to Woodward and anybody else now reading this in hindsight. It's pretty obvious. But what you should also take out of it, not that there's anybody that's still persuadable in the country, but what he's saying is Trump's now back in charge. It's not the doctors. That this is on him. This disaster can no longer be blamed on the doctors. It never could, because, of course, if we had followed the doctor's advice, we probably would have been much better off. There would still be people dead. It would still be a tragedy, but I think we'd be better off. But this is a clear statement. We are taking ownership of this. He thought that was going to look good in hindsight, and that's exactly how dumb he is. And all of this is interspersed with clips from the tapes, too, so you can actually hear him say it if you're interested. We won't play it on the show because, we got enough talking to do around here. So let's see. This is the clip that he plays here. The transcript of it is, there were 3 phases. There's the panic phase, the pain phase, and then the comeback phase. By the way, that's a terrible plan. Never plan a panic phase. Just shouldn't be done. I do believe that last night symbolized the kind of the beginning of the comeback phase. That doesn't mean there's not still a lot of pain and there won't be pain for a while, but that basically was, we've now put out rules to get back to work. Trump's now back in charge. It's not the doctors. They've we have like a negotiated settlement. Okay, so even the terrible clips that are chopped up by the CNN reporters to make them look like they make sense, don't make sense. But as a whole, the way he said it, again, raw tape, never good for Trump. Even when it's not Trump, it's not good for Trump. So anyway, there's still also there was one other thing I wanted to pull out of here, right? Not only one, you should never plan a panic phase, but this is what passes for a plan for this guy. It's after the fact. Even if he would dispute that this is a plan, it's a bad description of what went on, and it's a post hoc description of what went on. He had no idea where to go. He had no idea where it was going. He had no idea how to steer the thing. He's just telling you, I was around when it happened. There was a panic phase. I saw it. There's a pain phase. I see it now. My plan is we'll have a comeback phase, because that's what you do, right? There's some panic. There's some pain. We'll have a great success phase. He's so empty-headed. It's disturbing. I can't go on, but I'll do it. The statement reflected a political strategy, and that's important to note, too. Every sentence of this so far is key to me. Instead of following the health experts' advice, Trump and Kushner were focused on what would help the president on Election Day. And guess what? It's not helping the president on Election Day. I mean, bad plan from that perspective, too. By their calculations, Trump would be the, quote, open up president, which suffers from poor phrasing, among other things. CNN has obtained audio of 2 separate interviews with Kushner, which were conducted in April and May as part of Woodward's reporting for his book, Rage. In the wide-ranging conversations, Kushner described the president's relationship with his public health advisors in adversarial terms. Well, I'll even give him a break on that. I mean, he probably isn't the way you should have been approaching this stuff, but it's not necessarily the case that you can't govern well from like the team of rivals, or, zealous advocacy in the court system leading to a proper outcome as every, angle is explored. But knowing who's in charge here, the fact that it's adversarial is probably bad news. Like to the tune of 250,000 people dead, bad news. Kushner was also dismissive of party politics, calling the Republican Party, quote, a collection of a bunch of tribes, unquote, also nonsensical, and describing the GOP platform. Oh, wow, there's so much packed into this. My head is exploding. All right, since I've paused, the fact that he's dismissive of party politics sets me off as well. This is a political plan, as they state here, right? That Kushner is setting forth a political strategy. We learned in the paragraph before last, a political strategy, and then he says, "But I hate politics. I'm dismissive of party politics," which is all you got here. So if you're going to set out a political strategy rather than a healthcare strategy in the middle of a pandemic, you damn well better be into politics. But no, he's dismissive of party politics, calling the Republican Party, and now here again, in eloquence, a collection of a bunch of tribes, which is as redundant as it gets and is meaningless. A collection of a bunch of people, also in a bunch. Whatever, and describe the GOP platform, here's where I stopped, as, quote, a document meant to, like, piss people off, basically. that's the end of the quote. Not the end of the paragraph. There's more anger to come. That one is amazing as well. For a guy dismissive of party politics, the guy, I mean, he knows nothing about how these parties work or about how politics works. And there may even be a grain of truth to what he's saying here about the platform. But that's not supposed to be what the platform is. That's how he views it because he hates, quote unquote, hates party politics, which is another way of saying, I don't know what the F happens in party politics, so I'm dismissive of it. I hate it because I'm dismissive of and hate everything I don't understand, with the possible exception of new and interesting cuisines that I can get from expensive restaurants in New York City, to which I'll never be able to successfully return. Anyway, this idea that, well, the party platform, that's nerd stuff, so I don't read it anyway. And then the idea that, well, it's just a collection of stupid stuff meant to piss people off. Now, I think that the Republican Party platform now might actually be viewed that way, possibly. There's a grain of truth to it in that the trolls have taken over. He goes on in this paragraph to say, Kushner went on to tell Woodward that Trump did a, quote, full hostile takeover. Again, real estate and investor a-hole language in here. A full hostile takeover of the Republican Party when he became its presidential nominee. There's possibly some truth to that as well, although I think they give themselves far too much credit for it, as they do with almost everything. But the idea that you would then view the party platform for like true believers in the Republican Party, not, true believers in various bits of nuttery who happen to adhere to the Republican Party as closest to its brand, their brand of nuttery, but, real party people who participate in things like formulating the platform at the conventions. Now, there's something that's designed to piss people off. It'll piss them off. I mean, that's a true believers document. It's always a bit of a mishmash, probably for any party. But still, there are some true believers doing some work behind there. And to reduce it to, this is basically a collection of trolling statements, is pretty amazing. It's also amazing that he would come to that conclusion. I read in this that there's a bunch of stuff in there that probably pisses him off too. And he dismisses the whole thing. Well, it's supposed to piss people off. This is for trolling, either trolling Democrats or moderate Republicans or whatever. One, that would be acceptable to him is a terrible idea, given who he is. And two, that, he's in a position presumably to actually make some changes in the thing. But instead he says, the purpose is to piss people off. Which, of course, then again, the party platform is always, the purpose really has been to get other people to read it and realize that they should adhere to the philosophy of the party. So it's kind of been stood on its head. That's another problem. And, it's just astonishing that he just takes no interest in what the party is about and what they're trying to do. It's massively insulting, I think, to everyone in America. It's well done there. He's a great advisor. So, moving on. He also told Woodward, and here's the line where, if you've read it already or heard about it already, you knew I was going to have to read this story. This is the most mind-numbing thing I've ever read. My brain exploded the minute I read this one. This is I've never encountered, even from Donald Trump, even from Sarah Palin, such a stunning lack of self-awareness. I knew as soon as I tweeted it out the other day that people were going to bring me Dunning-Kruger lines about this, and you did not disappoint. He told Woodward, quote, "The most dangerous people around the president are overconfident idiots." Oh my God. Oh my effing God. I can't believe he said that. The most dangerous people around the president are overconfident idiots, and that Trump had replaced them with, quote, more thoughtful people who kind of know their place. I can't stop on any. There's no sentence he utters in here that isn't deserving of 6 breaks in it. The first one's obvious. I don't have to say any more about that. The most dangerous thing is to surround him with overconfident idiots. Obviously, he defines exactly that. I mean, also other people said, open the dictionary on overconfident idiots, right? There he is. Then this other part drew a lot of comment too. More thoughtful people is who they should be replaced with, who kind of know their place, which is about one of the most elitist things you can say about any. Just check yourself if you're about to say that. One of two phrases you really should, alarm bells should ring. One is, in almost any context, saying the words, those people. That should stop you in your tracks. And the other is, know your place. Wow. Kushner's comments about the administration's handling of the pandemic underscore the extent to which Trump and Kushner minimized the public health crisis, even as it was exploding last spring. At that time, positive cases in the U.S. regularly crested around 30,000 per day. You know where we are now, of course. We just broke records several days in a row, over 80,000. On April 15th, 3 days before Kushner's interview, deaths from COVID-19 reached their all-time peak at more than 2,600 per day. And hospitalizations for the virus were at their peak, or their first peak anyway, as well, nearly reaching 60,000 for several days in April. During this period, New York still bore the brunt of the virus, and deadly surges had not yet swept across the South and Midwest. When asked about CNN's reporting by CNBC Wednesday night, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert and a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, said it was clear that there had been a, quote, pivot, another bad word to use, a pivot away from focusing on public health, which is really no place to pivot from in the middle of a pandemic. I don't know exactly the timing, but it was clear that some months ago there was a pivot away from complete focusing on public health issues to looking at opening up the country with regard to the economy, Fauci said. Kushner's comments reflect what many health experts say is at the heart of the administration's flawed approach to the pandemic, a premature push to reopen the country and sideline medical professionals that led to waves of new infections during the summer and record-setting cases this fall. It was almost like Trump getting the country back from the doctors, right? Kushner told Woodward on April 18th, in the sense that we now did what was, he's going to own the open up. Again, I must comment on the ineloquence of his, of all of his statements. This one is pretty amazing, but it really winds up on a great one. And I want to take that one away, make that little gold star next to him. He's going to own the open up. Well, that's been effed up beyond all recognition. And he owns that. Imagine in April, I guess at the time, thinking that was going to be good come November. Well, that's where his head is. All right. Again, that segment is available in an audio clip. You can play it if you want to hear the tone of voice that goes along with it. Kushner's comments from 6 months ago look particularly damning as the U.S. undergoes a fall surge of infections that is, again, breaking records. The U.S. added 73,240 new cases Tuesday, and a record peak of more than 83,000 cases was reported on Friday. I guess we're talking here about last Tuesday and last Friday. But we're back up above 80,000 these days, too. The rise in cases has been closely followed by an increase in coronavirus deaths, because that's what the virus does. This month, 11 states reported their highest single day of new deaths since the pandemic began. And though researchers are racing towards a vaccine, It will be months before one is expected to be widely available. Remember, by the way, when he was going to do it before the election? It's Friday, October 30th. So put that down there with the $200 prescription cards, the fully developed healthcare plan, the miracle cure being given to every senior in America for free, and on and on and on. Let's see, where were we? Right. There'll be months before one's expected to be available. Health experts have cautioned that the public needs to take the virus seriously in the meantime. If we continue our current behavior, by the time we start to go down the other side of the curve, 500,000 people will be dead, CNN medical analyst Dr. Jonathan Reiner said Tuesday. Since October began, 29 states have reported at least one record high day of new cases, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. Now onto a new section here, equally infuriating, being a cheerleader for the economy. Kushner also described for Woodward the political calculations for the president. Instead of coming up with a federal plan to tackle the virus, Trump would put that responsibility on governors. In his April 18th interview, Kushner described how he believed Trump had set himself up to reap the political benefits of a successful containment of the virus, as though that was going to happen, while ensuring that state governors and not the president would be blamed for any failure to stop the spread. Great plan. The states have to own the testing, Kushner said. The federal government should not own the testing. And the federal government should not own the rules. It's got to be up to the governors because that's the way the federalist system works. As though he had any idea. So there you go. That's an interesting approach to things. We will accept all the praise for ending the pandemic, even if we don't end the pandemic, and put all the blame for perpetuating the pandemic, even though our not having a plan is what perpetuated it, on the governors, because that's federalism. Once again, the clip is here. You can hear the mangled way in which he says it for yourself. I hope you enjoy it. We'll move on with more of this article after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, the quote is really something else. Now, there's more description of the quote following, so that means we can just read on with the article. Kushner goes on here to say, quote, "But the president also is very smart politically." I need the Family Feud buzzer sound effect for that immediately. The president is also very smart politically with the way he did that fight with the governors to basically say, no. I own the opening. Wow, amazing. Now, in hindsight, I own this tremendous failure that killed 250,000 people. Because again, the opening is going to be very popular. And there, it's a little less wacky sounding. If it had been successful, and even though it's not been successful, in some quarters it's very popular. Let's all die. Let's do herd immunity, what have you. I need to make money. We have to open up because people can't live without my crappy buffalo wings at my stupid bar, whatever. Okay, that's kind of where I own the opening. That should kill him. But the opening is going to be very popular. I'm sure that they thought that was the case. People want this country to open, and they do. They still do. Yeah, I do. But I want to not die. But if it opens in the wrong way, we're still in the quote here. If it opens in the wrong way, the question will be, did the governors follow the guidelines we set out or not? I mean, I don't know if he knew exactly how this thing was going to play out. I mean, certainly in hindsight, that's the worst possible thing he could be saying. But yeah, if it opens the wrong way, and it did, the question will be, did the governors follow our guidelines, which we didn't give them, and we immediately screamed that they shouldn't follow when CDC forced us to give sensible ones? In a second interview with Woodward on May 8th, which, I mean, all of this is in strike one, sitting down with Bob Woodward and putting yourself on tape in April. But then again, on May 8th, Kushner insisted that one of Trump's tasks for boosting the economy was to be a cheerleader. Kushner referred to this as taking care of the psychology of the market. That's not a totally ridiculous phrase, but again, stupid businessman lingo. But it could kind of work. By the way, that's 2 Republican presidents in a row who are cheerleaders. One was literally a cheerleader, and then this doofus. Anyway, so then the cheerleader quote is also available for you to listen to on tape, but more analysis of what's in there. Quote, so if you basically say this is coming back in the fall, don't gear up, then people won't rehire. People will stay unemployed, Kushner told Woodward. I mean, if you say there's nothing we can do about it and it's coming back in the fall and you're all going to die, then and don't get ready for it and do nothing to prepare, then yeah, that's probably a bad message. But you could say this is coming back in the fall. We got to find out a way to live and have an economy and deal with the fact that it may never go away. But no, don't do that. And if you're planning for the worst case scenario, that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the things that the president's great at is he's a cheerleader. He's trying to make people feel good about the outcome. The outcome, again, so far, 250,000 Americans are dead. Feel good. Yay. Go death. Give me a D. I mean, I don't know what he thinks he's going to cheer his way out of, but, I mean, I guess he didn't know yet how many people were going to be dead, but there's this thing that could have told you. Well, there are these people that could have told you. They're doctors. They're scientists. But without that, math could have told you. Because, well, at that level, epidemiology is kind of a mathematical exercise. Here's the R0 on this thing. Here's how many people we got. This is about what you can expect to happen. And then it happened. The president himself supported Kushner speaking to Woodward for rage, according to another audio clip obtained by CNN, calling him one smart cookie. And boy, do I love cookies. That's not in there, actually, but close, I'm sure. This is, equally unbelievable. I told Jared to speak to you, and I believe he has, Trump told Woodward on February 19th. Now, I'm supposed to skip over this part and just keep reading to say, Trump said he asked Kushner to coordinate with others in the administration so that Bob can speak to anybody he wants to. Jared will handle. Very capable guy, Jared. You can't get people like this. Another mishmash, ineloquent, of course. But there was one part of the statement that I think we were supposed to brush right past. It's stupid, but it's just Trump. I told Jared to speak to you, and I believe he has. Trump told Woodward on February 19th. Is everybody with me on this, right? I told him to speak to you, and I believe he has, on February 19th. When did Jared speak to Bob Woodward, according to the article? The answer is April 18th, and then subsequently spoke to him again. Remember the second strike on May 8th? Yeah, May 8th. April 18th, May 8th. I told Jared to speak to you, and I believe he has on February 19th. Has he? He has not. But I believe he has, because I'm a giant basketball-headed moron. Okay. Anyway, not the biggest point there. Just another one of those irritating bits. Maybe he spoke to him and there's no tape. Or maybe there is tape and we didn't get those tapes yet. Just kind of wanted to point that one out. Anyway, then the rest of it is very smart cookie, all sentence fragments. Jared will handle. Very capable guy, Jared. You can't get people like this. You can't get good help these days. So I got Jared. Oh, my God. Then finally, the section in which the true nugget resides here. Activists and overconfident idiots. In speaking with Woodward, Kushner also expressed contempt for the Republican Party and praised his father-in-law's insurgent takeover of the GOP. I say he basically did a full hostile takeover of the Republican Party, he said on April 18th, again, the lingo. And I don't think it's even as much about the issues. I think it's about the attitude, whatever that's supposed to mean. And probably some truth to that. Calling political parties a, quote, collection of tribes, that's what we would call in the biz or in the English, a coalition, right? But, Jared Kushner, I will say, I was going to say, like Trump paid someone to take his SATs for him, allegedly. Jared Kushner paid someone to prep him for the SATs. And guess what? He was a very good tutor. I know him, a friend of mine from high school, just mortified to find out that he was responsible for this monster, I guess, getting the credentials he needed to fool people into thinking he was up to this task. But I guess they either didn't do any work on vocabulary or it just didn't stick. I don't know exactly what to make of this, but honestly, to be speaking about political groupings like this and to call it a collection of tribes when coalition is hanging right out there, you took the SAT English part. What's wrong with you, kid? All right, so anyway, calling political parties a collection of tribes, Kushner dismissed GOP activists who help craft the party's platform of policy ideas and aspirations as out of touch with regular voters. And that may be true, but, you don't want to say it. Parties, as they grow, tend to be more about being exclusive than inclusive, Kushner mused. This is political scientist Kushner musing here. And so, you look at, like, the Republican Party platform. It's a document meant to, piss people off, basically, because it's done by activists. Because that's what activists do. They piss people off. I don't know. Kind of a ridiculous statement. By the way, in the transcript of it, he blah, 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 all this stuff. And Bob Woodward's reaction to this. Remember where Bob Woodward made a living covering politics, right? So it's all crap. It's all BS. They're stupid. Party platforms don't mean anything. They're crafted by activists to piss people off. Bob Woodward says, yeah. I mean, I guess he's just saying, yeah, here's more rope. But still, you'd think maybe, how about, even that would have been enough. Months later, during its national convention, the Republican Party declined to update its platform and instead chose to readopt the 2016 platform, which I also think is interesting, by the way. Just again, in 2016, Trump didn't do anything. He famously didn't tinker with the platform. The only thing he did do was intervene on the language on Ukraine, which of course was a big tell for everybody. So now here's the hostile takeover of, based on attitude alone, just raw charisma for strongly leadering here in the Republican Party. He does a hostile takeover, and here he has, in Kushner's view, a document meant to piss people off. No one pisses people off better than Donald Trump. He's executed a hostile takeover of the party, and he changes nothing. He's the laziest asshole who ever walked the face of the earth. And you know what? He didn't even walk the face of the earth. He drove a golf cart over it. So that ought to tell you something. All right, so where were we? Yes, right. They chose to readopt the 2016 platform, and I think they even had to try to go back and edit things out because they said stuff that was anachronistic based on the fact that they just cut and pasted their whole platform. What a waste. Kushner's disdain also extended to those administration officials and advisors who had frustrated the president earlier in his term. People Kushner describes as, quote, overconfident idiots. And then the world turned into a black hole and collapsed on itself after he said that. We've gotten rid of the overconfident idiots, he told Woodward. And Woodward probably said, yeah, no, you haven't. No, you haven't. We've gotten rid of I'm sorry. I make a mistake. We've gotten rid of a lot of the overconfident idiots. That could still be true. And now he's got a lot more thoughtful people, who kind of know their place, and know what to do. Oh, okay. That full quote could give him a break on that one. Maybe if it just ends at know their place could just be an inartful way of saying know what to do. Like they know where at least the bodies in their portfolio are buried. Maybe, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, at this point, it won't do them any good. But okay. Again, the audio is here. You can take a look at it. And the article finally winds up here. In rage, Woodward writes that he believed Kushner was referring to former cabinet members and advisors James Mattis, Rex Tillerson, and Gary Cohn. For some reason, not the rest of them, too. There's plenty of others, but I guess those are the overconfident idiots. Well, anyway, in a September interview on NBC's Today Show, Kushner claimed Woodward had mischaracterized him and denied he had called those three men overconfident idiots. And that's actually like where the story ends. I think that's kind of hilarious all by itself that it just drops off there. Because, of course, that's open to interpretation, too. Well, you mischaracterized me. I didn't call those three guys overconfident idiots, which only leads to speculation about who did he call overconfident idiots. But don't speculate too hard. All he's saying is, well, I didn't call those three men overconfident idiots, meaning I never named them, but they are overconfident idiots, and I do believe it. And those were the ones I had in mind, but I didn't say those names. A very carefully crafted denial, which is amazing because he either stumbled onto it or it's the only carefully crafted thing he's ever been able to say. So, congratulations, I guess, either to you, Jared, if you finally made it, or to your lawyers who might have helped you craft that one. That's a hell of a story. I'm glad I got a chance to share it with you. I don't think I could have gotten the rest I need to recuperate from this surgery if that was still hanging out there over Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Can you imagine? This story comes out and it's old news and I can't talk about it. I couldn't have stood for it. Although, maybe that's no real loss, since after the operation, I don't really want to do any standing at all. So maybe it's okay. Anyway, let's move on now to a piece from The Atlantic that Greg shared with me on Wednesday. This one looked really interesting, though. Again, in The Atlantic, David Graham, who writes some good stuff there. The press is giving Trump a free pass again. That sounds like a bad thing, but a good point. Bad thing, good point. Media outlets appear to be operating on the assumption that Trump will lose and are covering his latest scandals accordingly. It's a plot twist, if you will. They've finally gotten around to the idea that it's okay to start to think that maybe Biden will win this thing, but as a result, what happens? You can teach an old journalist the occasional new trick, he begins, but two? Forget it. The 2016 election persuaded the press to avoid publicly presuming that Donald Trump will lose and the Democrat will win. The very cautious news coverage about Joe Biden's chances, despite his formidable advantage in the polls, makes this plain. But even though reporters are loath to say that the president is a serious underdog, they are repeating another 2016 error. Trump is getting off easy for a series of recent scandals. Most likely because press outlets have concluded that he is doomed and that coverage is largely pointless. What an interesting thought. From a radical reorganization of the civil service to sketchy Chinese bank accounts, the president has faced little scrutiny on what should be major topics of concern for voters. 4 years ago, the number of scandals swirling around the Republican nominee was too great for the average reporter, much less the average voter, to track. Yet, with the possible exception of the October surprise of the Access Hollywood tape, few of them gained any lasting purchase. Observers who assumed that voters would never accept Trump's past didn't reckon with the fact that it would get such short shrift. Meanwhile, in the closing days of the campaign, Hillary Clinton's emails were extensively covered, to say the least. In part, that was because many reporters and editors assumed that she would soon be president, and that questions about her term as Secretary of State would remain relevant for months or years to come. I would say that's the best excuse going for the travesty that we all witnessed. I mean, I don't accept it as an excuse, but it's the best one that they've got, as opposed to, well, maybe the more truthful one, actually. We all just hate Hillary Clinton for various reasons, but I don't know. Anyway, I think that's the best excuse in terms of it makes the most sense of it looking back. I don't know if that's what really drove it, but it's an excuse I can understand. We'll give it that. Anyway, I think you know what I mean, but that could be the painkillers talking. Instead, Clinton lost the election. The late-breaking email story may have played a large role in that, and Trump waltzed into office. Imagine him waltzing. He doesn't move that well. The emails quickly moved off the front pages, although the president continues to try to make them a topic of conversation. It became clear within weeks that the same questions about Trump that had been broadly overlooked during the campaign, on his shaky company, for example, and his foreign financial entanglements, would be major issues during his presidency, and indeed they have been. In 2020, it's clear that most of the press is trying to be careful not to count the ballots before they're cast. That has resulted in a more sophisticated horse race coverage over the closing weeks, even in places where the race doesn't seem to be particularly close. But as outlets focus on that coverage, as well as the coronavirus pandemic, they are giving insufficient attention to the continued flow of important news coming from the Trump administration. Last week, for example, Trump issued an executive order that would radically reshape the federal workforce. As the Washington Post explained, the order strips long-held civil service protections from employees whose work involves policymaking, allowing them to be dismissed with little cause or recourse, much like the political appointees who come and go with each administration. This sounds dull, but it's hugely consequential, and historically, even lethal. That is mentioned parenthetically and with the link, and I'm just sort of curious about the lethality claim. I just want to see what they're linking to. Damn it, I should have looked at the URL, because it is, in fact, linked to an Atlantic piece, which means that's my last freaking Atlantic piece for the month, because I'm not a subscriber. The good news is it's October 30th for you. And so it rolls over pretty quick, which is probably bad news in terms of me coughing up money to the Atlantic for a subscription. But I think I should probably take a look. One, because a great deal has just popped up. Get unlimited access for less than $1 per week. You can't beat that. Plus, the Atlantic has been fantastic. The reason I keep running out of stories. So maybe it works after all. Good job, you sneaky marketing bastards. You got me to do it. Okay, fine. $1 it is. Trump has already sought to make the executive branch his wholly owned political subsidiary, and this would extend his control. If you enjoyed the sidelining of the Environmental Protection Agency scientists and the extortion of Ukraine via the State Department, you'll love this. By the way, am I going to tell you what the other Atlantic article was? It's ethical quandary here. If I'm going to pay, then you got to pay. On the other hand, information wants to be free, man, and I could do you a favor. But you probably haven't run out of Atlantic articles this month, so you know you can click on it. How about that? We'll make it a teaser. Anybody who's run out of Atlantic articles, email me and I'll tell you what it was. You could probably guess. You're smart people. Think about it. Don't think about it in a modern context. You're talking about all of history. Okay, now you got a game to play over the weekend. Back to the story here. The order requires agencies to determine which jobs are subject to the new rule by January 19th. But as the Post dryly notes, that's the day before the next presidential inauguration. An administration under Democratic nominee Joe Biden would be unlikely to allow the changes to proceed. If Biden doesn't win, however, it will be a massive reorganization that voters hardly heard about before casting their ballot. They may even, of course, have cast their ballot before they got a chance to hear about it, before it was even issued. The president's personal finances continue to be an elephant in the room that somehow gets ignored. Yesterday, which would have been, I think Tuesday when this was written, the Washington Post reported that Trump has directed $8.1 million from U.S. taxpayers and from political donors into his own coffers. Yes, that's true. That's sitting in pocket and for possible consideration. Maybe today. We'll see how the timing goes. But $8.1 million from taxpayers and political donors into his own coffers. That's the latest in a string of astonishing figures turned up by David Fahrenthold and several colleagues, which has gone largely unremarked. Have gone, it actually says it. Okay. The New York Times has produced a series of huge scoops on Trump's taxes, including the revelation on October 20th that the president possesses a bank account in China and has paid substantially more taxes there than he has in the United States, of which he is the president. That makes me smart, or that makes me Chinese. Yet, despite the dogged reporting from these outlets, these stories have failed to catch much attention elsewhere. During the last presidential debate, Biden challenged Trump to release his tax returns. First of all, I called my accountants, underwrote it. What does he mean, underwrote? I'm going to release them as soon as we can. I want to do it, Trump said. Of course, that's a lie, but what does he mean here? I underwrote it? Is that like, I'll throw in a financial term and then I'll think I'm talking about taxes. I called my accountants, underwrote it. Makes no sense to me. Well, this is laughable, not least because it doesn't make any damn sense. Trump said this repeatedly during the 2016 race, and he still hasn't followed through as usual. He blames the fact that he is under audit, though that is not a legal impediment to their release. Most likely he doesn't want to release them for the same reason he is under audit. Something there isn't kosher. Reporters laughed at this promise and then moved on. They know it's nonsense, but who cares? For close watchers, it's just Trump being Trump. Although most people are not regular Trump watchers, that's true. Pundits have concluded that nothing will change opinions about the president, and besides, if Trump loses the election, as expected, this will mostly be a dead issue. It will not. He should be prosecuted for every single bit of it. If he loses his bid for re-election, we finally have him where we want him. All this time he couldn't be indicted because he was a sitting president, and he won't be a sitting president. What's the point of having spent 4 years running around saying you can't indict a sitting president, but wanting to, if when the guy is no longer a sitting president, you don't indict him? Let's get on that, shall we? But then again, what if he doesn't? I guess this is the to be sure sentence of the article. What if he doesn't lose? Then the president has more than $400 million in loans, many of them personally guaranteed. Again, personally guaranteed. Him, not his companies, not the LLCs. Donald Trump, the human. That's badly phrased. Donald Trump, the entity posing as human. Is that better? Purportedly human. I should take my own advice. All right. Well, he's got $400 million in loans hanging over his head in the next term. He has no obvious way to pay them off unless you can't collect against the sitting president. Now becomes a new mantra for us. If he's a private citizen, because he loses, that's a personal financial catastrophe. If he's the president, it's a national security catastrophe. Would any bank dare crack down on a sitting president? What would it mean if it cut him favors instead? There are plenty of other examples of scandals that have gotten too little attention, such as Trump's continued railroading of the Justice Department, his near rejection of disaster relief funds to California, his attempts to punish blue states for policy choices, and his efforts to convert Voice of America, this one we haven't done, and its siblings into a pro-Trump propaganda network. Even his impeachment has been all but forgotten. The skimpy coverage isn't due to the media's fear of being seen as biased against Trump. Coverage of how the administration botched the coronavirus pandemic has generally been strong and consistent. The disastrous federal response will, however, remain a live story long after the current presidential term ends. Paradoxically, the press has arguably also been too easy on Biden at times. Both sides. Okay, we'll see what he means here. Hold on. Don't lose your stuff here. Ooh, almost missed it myself here. Okay, Trump's allies overreached with attempted hit jobs on his son Hunter Biden, trying to claim without evidence that Joe Biden was involved in unsavory business schemes. This, along with the fear of overemphasizing the issue, as it did with Clinton's emails in 2016, has kept the mainstream press far from the story. But as Ross Douthat argues, even though we never know how to pronounce his name, the business entanglements of a potential first son are not a non-story, nor are those of Biden's brother. Biden is plainly not as vigorous as he once was, an issue that has gone largely unexplored. That's partly due to old-fashioned notions of propriety that have prevented more frank grappling with Trump's obvious mental unfitness for the presidency, and partly because Trump claimed that Biden was too senile to even run for president, a bar the Democrat easily cleared. These are real failings by the press, but this is not a question of seeking some false balance. Trump is getting away with more and receiving less scrutiny than Biden is. If it is true that he's getting that pass because the media presume he's an underdog, they are playing a risky game, glossing over some of Trump's more dangerous issues on the assumption that he will lose could itself affect the course of the election and make his winning more likely. It's happened before. God, yes, it has happened before. That's exactly how it happened. So, interesting story. Good catch, Greg. Good call. Definitely worth my last click for The Atlantic. And like I said, I guess that means that I probably enjoy The Atlantic enough to perhaps go and pay for it. And far be it from me to do or say anything that would discourage you from paying for the journalism you like to hear, or this crap, too, which is also something you might like to hear. I don't know. Anyway, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, we got one more segment to fill your head with knowledge for the weekend. How about if we segue off of the previous piece, because that always proves, I think, successful, to have a theme. David Fahrenthold, I think his latest installment in his long-running series, The President is a Lying Jerk. It's probably not the title. But this one, he works with Josh Dawsey, Jonathan O'Connell, and Anu Narayanswamy. Ballrooms, candles, and luxury cottages. Oh my, I think you have to say after that kind of cadence. During Trump's term, millions of government and GOP dollars have flowed to his properties. The 45th president, this is what the actual title of this series is, I didn't realize. The 45th president, one in a series looking back at the Trump presidency. That is a dumb subtitle. Okay, the story. President Trump welcomed the Japanese Prime Minister at Mar-a-Lago in front of a towering arrangement of roses. The two could have met in Washington, but Trump said his private club was a more comfortable alternative. It is indeed the Southern White House, Trump said, greeting Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in front of the press in April of 2018. Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, of course, we learned a long time ago on the show, is what it should be. But whatever. For Trump, there was another hidden benefit. Money. That's not really hidden, but okay. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump's company would get paid to host his summit. In the next 2 days, as Trump and Abe talked about trade and North Korea, Trump's Palm Beach, Florida club billed the U.S. government $13,700 for guest rooms, $16,500 for food and wine, and $6,000 for the roses and other floral arrangements. By the way, I feel compelled at this point to remind you that $16,500 for food and wine, it's not just a wine cost. Trump doesn't drink, apparently. I guess everybody else does, and you got to serve them wine. Although, he's such an egoist. Why doesn't he just say, I don't drink wine. None of you should drink wine. And but food, that he does indulge in, I do believe. Then, of course, $6,000 for roses and other floral arrangements, which I'll point out, very nice to have, sort of expected at a diplomatic summit of sorts, which this really wasn't. But at the White House, they have florists on staff, and they've got a budget and everything. So the idea of doing all of this stuff, you remember when he was saying he was going to use Mar-a-Lago and other venues for things, and it was going to save the government money somehow. Guess what? It doesn't. Anyway, Trump's club even charged for the smallest of services. When Trump and Abe met alone with no food served, the government still got a bill for what they drank. Bilateral meeting, the bill said. Water, $3 each. What an a-hole. Those 2018 payments, revealed here for the first time, are part of a long-running pattern whose scope has become clear only in recent months. Since his first month in office, Trump has used his power to direct millions from U.S. taxpayers and from his political supporters into his own businesses. The Washington Post has sought to compile examples of this spending through open records requests and a lawsuit. In all, he has received at least $8.1 million from these two sources since he took office, those documents and publicly available records show. The president has brought taxpayer money to his businesses simply by bringing himself. He's visited his hotels and clubs more than 280 times now, making them a familiar backdrop for his presidency. And in doing so, he has turned those properties into magnets for GOP events, including glitzy fundraisers for his own re-election campaign, where big donors go to see and be seen. Trump says the reason is comfort. People like my product. What can I tell you? You can't help it, he told reporters last year. But documents show that visits by Trump, his family, and his supporters have turned the government and the Republican Party into regular customers for the family business. In the case of the government, Trump's visits turned it into a captive customer. Newly revealed documents show what the government needed from Trump's properties, it had to buy from Trump's company. That's, again, where Trump said he could save the government money. But they've never done it. Gee whiz. So, the more he went, the more he got, which is why you should expect, win or lose, I would imagine, that he will spend almost all the time between the election and the inauguration hanging out in Mar-a-Lago, but especially if he loses. Anyway, so the more he went, the more he got. Since 2017, Trump's company has charged taxpayers for hotel rooms, ballrooms, cottages, rental houses, golf carts, votive candles, floating candles, candelabras, like Liberace over here, furniture moving, resort fees, come on, decorative palm trees, strip steak, chocolate cake, breakfast buffets, $88 bottles of wine, and $1,000 worth of liquor for White House aides, and water. Since Trump took office, his company has been paid at least $2.5 million by the U.S. government, according to documents obtained by the Post. In addition, Trump's campaign and fundraising committee paid $5.6 million to his companies since his inauguration in January of 2017. Those payments, turning campaign donations into private revenue, continued even this year as Trump fell behind in the polls and his campaign ran short of money. The combined total of these payments was more than Trump's hotels in Vancouver and Hawaii brought him during the same period, according to financial disclosures. The Trump Organization is not prohibited from accepting these payments, but the payments did break a key promise from 2016. Well, duh. All things break his promises. Trump's pledge that he would, quote, completely isolate himself from his businesses once in office and put his voters' interests above his own. If I win, I may never see my property. I may never see those places again, Trump said on the campaign trail then, because I'm going to be working for you. I'm not going to have time to go play golf, believe me. Well, how do you feel if you believed him? Well, you know what? The answer is brainwashed and loving it. Trump still owns his businesses, of course, but says he's given day-to-day control to his eldest sons. There is no official total of what Trump's company has been paid by the government and Trump's campaign since he took office. The company and the campaign have both declined to say and did not respond to respond to questions for this story. White House spokesman Judd Deere also declined to give a total. Any suggestion that the president has used his own official travel or the federal government as a way to profit off of taxpayers is an absolute disgrace and lie. Deere disgracefully lied in a statement. I did a little editorializing there. See if you can find it. Without an official accounting of these payments, the Post has sought to compile its own. It relied on public databases of campaign spending and hundreds of pages of federal spending records obtained via public records requests, public records lawsuits, and other means. The result is a never-before-seen portrait of the presidency as a revenue stream, because it's never been done before. I mean, that's implicit in this, but I think you should make it explicit. While Trump was publicly donating his $400,000 annual presidential salary, he was privately using his power to bring his businesses far more than that. Americans elect a president to serve the people, not profit off them. Yet President Trump exploits his office to line his pockets with taxpayer dollars, said Ryan Shapiro of the group Property of the People, whose lawsuits and public records requests helped bring to light some of the earliest details of this spending. Much spending remains hidden because some federal agencies, including the State Department and the White House itself, have declined to release records. The amounts we're seeing are just the tip of the iceberg, Shapiro said. Now, taxpayer payments. The payments from taxpayers to Mar-a-Lago started in Trump's first full month on the job, February 2017. He was meeting Abe at the club. His aides would need rooms. According to federal policy, the most they could pay was $182, but Mar-a-Lago was not charging $182. There's a 5-bedroom house that 3 of the senior staff are staying in at $2,600 per night. State Department employee Michael Dobbs wrote his colleagues in an email letter released to the public. The 2 other senior staffers, Bannon and Walsh, Steve Bannon, are expected to be charged $546 for their rooms. Within the State Department emails show, officials did not seem inclined to fight. It's against the rules, but, what am I going to do? He hates rules. Federal rules allowed them to pay up to 3 times the normal limit, $546 in this case, with authorization. And the White House authorized it. Months later, Mar-a-Lago lowered the rate it charged the State Department to $396.15 per night and provided partial refunds for some of the earlier charges above that. Maybe they're too modest to say so, but I think it was their expose of that cozy little arrangement that forced the White House to see that be done. Within the White House, one former official said some officials grumbled about holding events at Mar-a-Lago. The events required dozens of staffers, in this case, the meeting with Abe. The events required dozens of staffers and enormous logistics, which had to be shoehorned into a private club on a narrow island full of other nosy, paying guests. And there were some ethics concerns about the president repeatedly visiting his own properties. That actually came second. It's a hell of a lot easier to do it at the White House, which is set up for it, the former official said, speaking, like others, on the condition of anonymity. It's a pain in the brackets. They did some editing here. Posterior. I mean, even I'll say ass. It's a pain in the posterior. But who knows? Maybe he said poop hole. I don't know why they had to feel like they did that, but that makes it a lot funnier to imagine. It's a pain in the posterior, having those guys down there for the staff. Foreign leaders also sought the prestige of visiting the president at his vacation home because they believed it showed a close bond with the United States, 2 former officials said. Trump returned 2 months later with Chinese President Xi Jinping. He was truly of the opinion that his property was better than anyone else's property, and he wanted you to know it. What a posterior hole. And Mar-a-Lago's bills only got bigger that time, according to State Department records newly obtained by the Post. Now there were florist bills. When Trump visited with Xi Jinping of China in April of 2017, the club had started charging for flowers, and $50 per palm for decorative palm trees. Okay. But that doesn't make any sense. I thought that we were talking about a florist bill. Was the florist bill just much higher when Abe Shinzo showed up? I don't know. They seem to have switched the order of them here. Okay. Well, at any rate, that same weekend, a group of White House staffers gathered in a Mar-a-Lago bar adorned with a large portrait of Trump wearing tennis whites. They kicked out the bartender so they could speak confidentially, according to an email Mar-a-Lago's catering director sent to the State Department later. The group then helped themselves to the contents of the bar. 26 servings of Patron and Don Julio tequila. I bet they didn't really keep count either. They probably just drank down the bottles and figured how many servings are there in each one of these bottles. I guess they probably did that. 22 Chopin vodkas and 6 glasses of Woodford Reserve bourbon, documents show. Okay, whatever. The bill to the government, $1,005.60, including a service charge, after having kicked out the bartender, of course. The State Department refused to pay, emails show, but ProPublica, which first revealed this bill, reported that the White House eventually did. The White House has not responded to questions asking how much it has paid Trump's clubs out of its own budget. But the most expensive and most famous event of the weekend was the formal dinner for 30, where Trump informed Xi about U.S. missile strikes against Syria during dessert. And it wasn't Syria eating the dessert either. It was them. The most beautiful piece of chocolate cake you've ever seen, Trump later said in an interview with Fox Business Network. I still rank it among one of the dumbest things he's ever said, or the one that made me feel that he was the dumbest, I guess. It was just so weird and childish. Anyway, taxpayers likely paid for that. Mar-a-Lago charged $7,700 for that dinner, a charge that appears to have covered Trump's food as well. Trump returned to the club a year later for another summit with Abe. The mood that time was more tense, with North Korean missile threats looming over the two leaders. In preparation, Mar-a-Lago bought, here's the answer, $6,000 worth of floral arrangements. They prevent nuclear weapons from doing any damage in your country. It's a well-known thing. If you travel to another country and view a beautiful, beautiful flower arrangement and then go back to your country and they nuke you, nothing happens. Everyone should try it. The list of preparations filled a full page. There were 3 kinds of candles, right? Votive, floating, candelabra. Centerpieces, vases. Do you want to say it that way? Vases? Are we fancy enough? And a floral plan for even the smallest of meetings. A floral plan. That he planned. There's no pandemic response plan, but there's a floral plan. I don't even know what to say. Even National Security Council pre-briefs got their own centerpieces, the bill showed. And that's, again, not unusual at the White House, where it's all budgeted. Taxpayers were billed for all of it, records show. Mar-a-Lago's florist, Julie Miner, declined to comment, citing a non-disclosure agreement. A White House official who spoke on condition of anonymity defended Trump, saying, "The president has hosted near 100 head of state and government visits since 2017, and only a fraction were at his own properties." The thing is, the fraction shouldn't be a fraction. It should be 0. But last year, Trump sought to award his own company a much bigger event. Remember this, the massive Group of 7 summit, which Trump gave to his Doral Golf Club in Miami. That event would have brought hundreds of foreign and U.S. officials to that property. Trump reversed the decision days later, retreating under public pressure and resistance from his own aides and coronavirus. His visits brought another customer, though, the Secret Service. When Trump visited Mar-a-Lago for 2 weeks at Christmas last year, for example, the club charged the Secret Service $32,400 for guest rooms. No charge for the Hanukkah guests in the Javanka family, I guess. They got to go for free because they weren't celebrating Christmas. I don't know. In addition, Trump's adult children have brought their father's company another $260,000 in taxpayer revenue on their own, records show, by taking solo trips to Trump properties with their own Secret Service agents in tow. And in some cases, Trump's properties even got paid on days when no Trumps were present at all. In Bedminster, New Jersey, for instance, Trump's club has charged the Secret Service $17,000 a month to rent a cottage from May to November, even on days when the family is absent. That's an unusually high rate for the area, but a former Trump administration official said they had to pay it to be ready if Trump suddenly decided to visit. Defense Department records recently obtained by the Post show a similar pattern of $17,000 payments to Trump's club in Bedminster in recent years. Pentagon officials declined to answer questions about whether they have a cottage there, too. That's starting to take on a Bernie Kerik kind of a flavor, I think. Wouldn't that be something? Like if top brass were vacationing there? I don't think that that's the case, but I guess I think that's the case. Anyway, in the past, the Trump Organization has defended its actions with two arguments. One is that even if it wanted to, it couldn't do all this for free, although that was a thing he kind of insinuated, if not actually promised. Legally, by law, you have to charge the federal government something. Otherwise, you get into all sorts of gift laws, Eric Trump told Fox News in February. Eric Trump has not specified what laws he's referring to. By the way, let me posit a situation for you. The Trump Organization declines to bill the federal government anything at all for these visits. Does not bill the Secret Service, doesn't bill anybody. Foots the bill for the summits, all from out of the budget of the Trump Organization, right? And they're charged with campaign finance law infractions of some kind. Trump pardons them. And you know what? He probably gets away with it too. I guess depending on the situation, he could always find a way to turn it into something filthy and illegal and make us all mad for having declined to charge the government. But if the Secret Service were protecting him, you know, and I wish they wouldn't, but if they were protecting him and they were not charged anything for the rooms or the bungalows or the cottages, and somebody got in trouble for doing it and Trump pardoned them, I think he might get away with that. There might be public support for that pardon. But you know what pardon he hasn't granted? That one. You know why he hasn't? Because he never bothered to find out whether anybody would get in trouble for his companies not charging them, because he wants the money. But okay, moving on. Ethics experts said they were baffled by that claim, since the agencies that the Trump Organization is known to have charged the most, the Departments of Homeland Security, State, and Defense, all have policies allowing them to accept gifts under some circumstances. But that requires reading, so they didn't check it out. There's nothing that would prohibit any government employee, including the president, from offering the government something for free if those circumstances are met, said Don W. Fox, who was acting director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics under President Barack Obama. The Trump Organization's second argument has been that although it must charge the government something, it charges only enough to cover its costs. You remember that lie fell apart, and it was Eric's lie. If my father travels, they stay at our properties for free, meaning like cost for housekeeping, Eric Trump told Yahoo Finance last year. If they were going to go to a hotel across the street, they'd be charging them $500 a night, whereas, we can charge them like $50. Among the hundreds of transactions reviewed by the Post, there were about 24 payments that came close to that description. On 3 occasions, when Trump visited his hotel in Las Vegas, for instance, the Defense Department reported paying just $74.51 per night for rooms, although that can be done in a lot of hotels in Las Vegas. The Defense Department declined to comment about those payments, but in cases where the Post could determine what room rate was charged, the Trump Organization mostly appeared to charge the maximum allowed under federal spending rules, or more. At Mar-a-Lago, the government was charging was charged rates ranging from $396.15 to $650 per room, according to documents obtained by the Post and people who have seen other unredacted receipts. The rate for the cottage at Bedminster worked out to $566 per night. Once, when Donald Trump Jr. stopped at the Trump Hotel in Vancouver, the Secret Service was charged $611 per night for his agent's rooms. The Trump Organization has not commented on these higher charges. Michael Cohen, Trump's longtime fixer and attorney, said he saw no sign of a discount in those rates. That's what anybody coming in would pay, said Cohen, who worked at the Trump Organization through the beginning of Trump's term. This year, he was, of course, released early from federal prison after pleading guilty to campaign finance violations and lying to Congress. Next up, campaign donors. The use of campaign contributions to pay Trump's businesses is not new. During the 2016 race, his campaign paid them about $12.5 million. But that time, Trump put in far more money than he got out, contributing $66 million to his own campaign. Maybe. In the 2020 campaign, he's done the opposite. Trump has donated a mere $8,020 to his 2020 campaign as of October 14th, records show. But his campaign and affiliated fundraising committees paid at least $5.6 million out to his companies. The two committees spent nearly $1 million from September 1st through October 14th, including $97,000 for lodging at Trump hotels and nearly $800,000 for catering and ballroom rentals, records show. RNC and campaign officials have said Trump has never ordered them to visit his clubs, but it was understood that he is more likely to attend if an event is at one of his properties. In those 2 months, Trump held 5 campaign events at his properties, including 2 in the same day. On September 25th, he held a Latinos for Trump event at his Doral resort in the morning and a fundraiser at his D.C. hotel in the evening. Trump had planned other campaign events at his D.C. hotel, but one other anyway, but it was canceled after he tested positive for coronavirus. Hilarious. His campaign is expected to mark election night there this week. Paul Seamus Ryan this week, next week, obviously, when election day is. We're not time traveling that much. Paul Seamus Ryan of the nonprofit group Common Cause said it was legal for candidates to rent things from their own business as long as they appeared to be paying market rates and not overcharging. But Ryan said he had never seen anyone do it at the scale Trump has. No one has done it at the scale. No one's been able to do it at the scale Trump has. It's extremely unusual, unprecedented in my experience, 20 years or so, watchdogging money in elections, said Ryan, an election law expert. Trump's campaign spends about $40,000 per month to rent office space in Trump Tower in Manhattan, which in 2016 served as its campaign headquarters. But this year, the campaign headquarters is not in Trump Tower. It's in Arlington, Virginia. None of Trump's key staff is in New York, and Trump no longer regularly visits there. The Trump campaign and the Trump Organization both declined, once again, to answer questions on the record about what happens now in the Trump Tower space. Trump's campaign and joint fundraising committee have also paid $3.2 million to rent banquet space for fundraisers at Trump properties. Campaign officials have said this is a decision that pleases both Trump and his big donors, who feel at home inside Mar-a-Lago and the Trump Hotel in Washington. In recent months, something unexpected happened to Trump's campaign, once called a Death Star by former campaign manager Brad Parscale. Several campaign officials have said they could use more money for television ads in the final stretch. It started to run short of money. The campaign's cash on hand shrank down to $43 million, far less than that of Democratic rival Joe Biden. That was surprisingly little for a campaign that started raising money far earlier than past incumbents seeking re-election. Trump's 2020 campaign had been fundraising since before Trump took office in 2017. The campaign has canceled TV ad buys in states such as Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. In emails to prospective donors, Trump asked for money in capital letters. Well, that's not unusual for him. "You've never let me down before, and I know you won't start now." Trump had somebody write for him, I should say, on September 23rd. "Contribute any amount right now." Like $1 million would be good. The next day, Trump's campaign paid Trump's businesses $40,000 in rent for that space in Trump Tower, where nobody will say what's going on, if anything. But what are you going to do? He's the president. You gotta funnel all taxpayer and campaign money into his pockets directly. It's always been true. I'm an originalist. Trust me, I know these things.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Okay, so hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed making it on painkillers. Stay tuned for Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. We'll see you next week on Monday. Then Tuesday, Election Day. Wow. See you then.